UFC 278, Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards 2. Welcome to your main card prediction video by yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. Of course, he goes by Zahn, I go by Harris, and as usual, full card fight predictions, giving you that betting perspective with these fights. We want to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights to avoid, which underdog has the best shot at winning, and some parlay action towards the end of the video as well. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you participate in the comments. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Boxing MMA Picks. This UFC 278 pay-per-view event is giving us 13 fights. As it stands right now, we have 8 of them occurring on the prelims and 5 of them on the main card. So we're going to get right to work. First fight of the prelims, we're looking at Daniel da Silva taking on Victor Altamirano. For Victor Altamirano, split decision loss to Carlos Hernandez back in February. That's also coming off of a split decision win performance on Dana White Contender Series. So in some ways, still has a lot to prove. He's a southpaw, Taekwondo style on the feet, introduced as a striker. You're going to see a lot of kicks out of him. You're going to see a lot of combinations out of him. Look for that stance switch. We see a stance there listed as switch. Technique, not the cleanest, but he can definitely be aggressive. I'm not a fan of his striking defense. Kind of keeps the hands low. He relies on head movement. He relies on reaction time rather than covering up effectively and staying technically sound. His takedown defense isn't really the best either. He's given up 7 takedowns in total between the two kind of UFC experiences that he has, going back to the Dana White Contender Series fight as well as his debut in his last fight. But he is good at making it a fight. Right? He finds himself in close rounds. He's tough, solid pressure, willing to brawl, and that could be a lot for a lot to handle for some opponents. For Daniel da Silva, he's on a 2-fight losing streak. Lost to Francisco Figueiredo back in April. He's a finish or be finished type of fighter. 100% finish rate in both of his wins and his losses. Right. Introduced as a striker as well. He is a southpaw. He's comfortable on the feet. A lot of kicks. I'm saying some similar things here. Sharp kicks. The pace is consistent, and he's always pressing forward. I've seen good takedown entries from him. I've seen aggressive ground and pound when applicable. I've also seen good positional ground control and good grappling in general. We know that he's a BJJ brown belt, but I feel that he overcompensates a bit, and it sometimes costs him. We saw him versus Jeff Molina, had him on the ground, overcompensated, lost position. Jeff Molina ended up on top. We saw him against Francisco Figueiredo, took him down, overcompensated. Francisco Figueiredo ended up locking in that knee bar. So he can get a little over aggressive and overcompensate and kind of give up those good positions that he would otherwise find himself in. I do think the underdog, da Silva, is kind of due for a win, though. I think that he's the cleaner striker of the two. I think he has a little bit more technique. I also think, again, he has that ability to land the takedown against Altamirano not having the best takedown defense. I think the key advantage for Altamirano is that I do believe he's tougher. I do believe he's more durable. I also believe he has better cardio. That could be costly for da Silva, especially late into the fight. But I do think da Silva can kind of do enough early on to swing the fight in his favor. I think more than anything, Altamirano just hasn't really shown me anything to be, really to be a favorite at all, especially the odds that he is at minus 175. If nothing else, I'm looking at this as a low level 50-50 type of fight. And in that situation, I'm going to like the underdog, who's kind of due for a win. So I'm looking at Daniel da Silva to get it done. But again, 50-50 fight in a lot of ways. I'm going to avoid this. I think this is a relatively low level fight.
Yeah, this is a low level fight. There's a lot of things I like with both fighters. Daniel da Silva, he's gonna have he's gonna be the flashiest striker. He technically is the better striker in this fight as well. But my problem with him is he doesn't carry that on throughout the fight. And from first round to second round, he's a different guy. And I think this is a spot where Victor's toughness, as you mentioned, his cardio, as the fight goes on, I think Victor is going to win a decision in this spot. So I can see a bet like over how many rounds, 2.5 rounds in this spot. But I think Victor Altamirano, as the fight goes on, I think his activity is just going to give him the fight. So I'm going to go with Victor Altamirano. Toughness, he has the good cardio, and I think Daniel has bad cardio. At this weight class, there's not many knockouts, so I think this is going to go the distance or even late. So I'm going to go with the guy with the better cardio. So I'm going to go with Altamirano to get the win.
Fight number two, we have Aoriqileng versus Jay Perrin. Aoriqileng beat Cameron Else. That was back in April. He's a patient striker, a lot of switch stance out of him. He's going to kind of draw you in before coming forward. Really only throws punches, though. Has a solid calf kick to go along with it. But again, just that patient approach on the feet. He picks his shots well. He's a sneaky counter puncher, and he has pretty good pop in his hands. Decent takedown numbers offensively. 5 takedowns landed over 3 UFC fights. Sometimes I like to look at total takedowns as opposed to the takedown average number. But he's also been taken down 5 times, although it was all in that Cody Durden fight that he had. In general, his takedown defense looks decent. I do believe he's above average on the ground. He has good cardio. He can go a full 15 minutes, no problem. Really just a solid overall fighter in Aoriqileng. But one of those fighters you got to be worried about, especially when you see a record like 19-9. That tells you kind of anything can happen in his fights. Going up against Jay Perrin, he lost to Mario Bautista back in February. That was a short notice UFC debut for him, so kind of against the odds there. Looks like he has decent hands. He, stays low in his stance, puts on forward pressure. The boxing skills look solid. The combinations look solid as well. Looks like he can handle his own on the ground, even in his debut. You saw him shooting for takedowns right away. You saw him looking to clinch right away. He does have some grappling. So four of his 10 wins are via submission. All guillotines, all rear naked chokes. Important to note in that Mario Bautista fight, he did land 2 takedowns, but he was taken down 4 times. So that speaks to his takedown defense or perhaps lack thereof. I think this is a pretty decent fight. I'm looking at both fighters being pretty solid all around. I do think both fighters can have moments on the feet, but I do think the key difference here is that when I look back at that Perrin versus Bautista fight, Perrin's striking defense, I think, is what could fail him here. Aoriqileng, like I said, really good counter striker, and I can see Perrin kind of trying to blitz forward, leaving that chin up, and potentially getting clipped. Overall, I think Aoriqileng better striker. And again, when I think about that ground ability, potentially canceling each other out, and like I mentioned, Aoriqileng has that cardio to go 3 rounds. So I do like him in this spot. Jay Perrin's still, inexperienced from the UFC perspective. So I think, Aoriqileng has that working for him as well. Small favorite in this one, but I do like Aoriqileng to get the job done.
Yeah, it's a matter of Jay Perrin. How long can he get the wrestling going? I see him getting some takedowns. I see him using some grappling. But I think Keelang, this guy's experienced, and he's going to be able to keep it on the feet in this new weight class. He looks strong. Yeah, he has that power, and I think that at some point he's going to hurt Jay Perrin. I think this is a good fight for Aoriqileng. I like his striking in this spot. I like his power, his forward movement. I think Perrin can get takedowns, but I don't think he's that type of wrestler that can get these takedowns like Durden did over a period of time. So I think at some point they're going to be stuck on the feet, and I think Aori gets it done.
All right, let's move on to the third fight of our prelims. We have Amir Albazi taking on Francisco Figueiredo. For Amir Albazi, he hasn't fought since January 2021. Beat Jalgas Jumagulov at that time. He has good boxing, good punching IQ, good jab, good combinations. Definitely sets up the openings pretty well. He has good striking defense, good timing, good counter punching ability as well. He can be a decent pressure striker, and he has shown me a ground game. You look at the numbers there, 2.28 per at 75% accuracy in terms of his takedowns. But more importantly, he stays active on top. Has a really good half guard, has really good side control, good jiu-jitsu, good wrestling. So kind of that overall package on the ground. Francisco Figueiredo, Brazilian, so we know he's going to come with some really good grappling. He does have some similarities in his style in comparison to his brother. in that, hands down, flat-footed, but good movement, pretty light on the feet, a lot of kicks, sharp kicks as well. Naturally a counter striker. Again, really sharp counter strikes and sharp hands in general. He has a good clinch. He can intelligently land those takedowns. We see his takedown accuracy at a high 75% as well. Good takedown defense, and of course, he has that submission ability, as we saw in his last fight when he won via knee bar. Despite the similarities that Francisco has to his brother Davison, nowhere near the level of his brother. I'll keep it short. I like Amir Albazi all day in this one. I think he's the more effective striker, much more consistent pace. I think he provides better wrestling. And I do think his grappling is more than good enough to, at the very least, not get caught by Francisco Figueiredo. So I like Amir Albazi all day in this one. Force minus 470, I'm struggling a bit with in terms of how steep those odds are. But in terms of making a pick, I'm not hesitating. Amir Albazi is going to be that pick.
Yeah, I'm rocking with Albazi as well, man. The grappling is a big advantage on his side, and in this fight, I see this fight being a lot of grappling. And in the stand up, Francisco's the better striker, but Albazi is not a bad striker. He's improving as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he has his moments in the striking, but I see this guy getting this to the mat. Yeah, he's the smarter fighter, and I like this spot from here to stay undefeated in the UFC.
All right, let's move on to our fourth fight of our prelims. We have AJ Fletcher taking on Ange Loosa. For AJ Fletcher, he had that unanimous decision loss to Matt Semmelsberger. That was back in his debut. That was back in March. A lot of movement around the ring, some switch stance. The striking does look pretty decent. It's clean, feints, level changes. Pretty light on the feet. I mentioned those level changes because kind of a wrestler first. He has good takedowns. He has good entries, good top control as well. For Ange Loosa, he lost his debut back in April to Munir Lazez. A good long jab. He's going to have a 7-inch reach advantage in this fight that he's definitely looking to take advantage of. Overall, is a pretty solid kickboxer. Good calf kick, decent technique on the feet as well. Has those explosive moments. So of those 8 wins that he has, 5 of them are via KO, TKO, but doesn't really offer much consistency in terms of his attack or his pace. And that's kind of my biggest concern for Loosa in this fight. AJ Fletcher lost his debut because he was going up against someone who was always looking to put that forward pressure on with his striking in Matt Semmelsberger, of course. He was able to implement the takedowns. He was still able to implement top control, but he made a few mistakes that allowed Matt Semmelsberger to get on top of him and stay on top of him. Although Loosa is decent on the feet, I don't think he has that same imposing pressure style that Matt Semmelsberger has. Loosa, to me, also hasn't really shown me anything in the takedown department to make me believe that he can get a win here. I think AJ Fletcher should be more than good enough on the feet to kind of hang around. Again, the level changes is going to work well for him because I think there could be a huge discrepancy when it comes to the takedowns and when it comes to the wrestling. We know AJ Fletcher's pretty aggressive with that. We know he's going to go for it. We know he's going to land it. And again, I don't think Loosa's offering enough on the other side of things. Pace, pressure, aggressiveness, takedown defense. Neither of these things do I think is good enough to kind of keep up with AJ Fletcher. So I like AJ Fletcher in this spot. I think minus 160 is actually a pretty decent value, especially in today's UFC where a better wrestler can almost guarantee you 2 rounds. I think AJ Fletcher has that in him, and I think he will get I think he will get the job done to get his first UFC win.
Man, AJ Fletcher, he looked good on the Contender Series, but I wasn't impressed. He does have that dog in him. He does have that aggression, that forward pressure. But I think these are things that can work for Loosa in this fight. Being the better counter striker. The only problem with Loosa, he's kind of patient with his striking. But I think he's the better striker in this fight. And Loosa can wrestle. Now I'm not saying he's gonna go for takedowns, but he is aware in that element that I think he can keep it on the feet here. I think this fight's gonna be on the feet. Majority, maybe at the first round, I think Fletcher's very dangerous. But I think if Loosa can get out of that first round, I think the fight's going to go in his favor here with the better strikes, the counter striking, getting him at range with that reach. I like Loosa in the spot, man. I'm going to go with the underdog.
All right, let's move on to our fifth fight in the prelims. We have Miranda Maverick versus Shanna Young. Miranda Maverick beat Sabina Matzo back in March. Stand up is decent, probably decent at best. Southpaw, she's willing to engage. She'll throw those combinations. She does have a good pace and good activity about her. Likes to come forward as well. Her strength is on the ground, though. Good ground game, good grappling. She's a BJJ brown belt, accolade wise. Great pressure and control when she is on top. Good ground and pound as well. Pretty strong physically. Not really the best at handling pressure though from her opponents. Surprisingly, being kind of a takedown artist, she only has 44% takedown defense in her own right. Probably won't matter in this fight, but it does show that she kind of has holes in her game. But very young, right? She just turned 25, so she can definitely improve vastly on a fight over fight basis. Shanna Young, on the other hand, beat Gina Mazzani back in April. Southpaw, switch stance type of fighter, despite it saying orthodox there. She is light on the feet, not really the most technical, but her hands have gotten sharper. She likes that karate side kick as well. She's decent in terms of the clinch against the cage. It looks like she has some grappling knowledge as well. I have seen some takedowns from her, despite the UFC numbers not quite being there. Again, just kind of showed good takedown defense in her last fight, even though on paper she's only at 60% in that category. But her previous fights were a weight class above, right? So her coming down to 125, this new lower weight class could serve her well. I think Shanna Young is very live here. First of all, I would say you probably want to avoid betting on this. I think if you are going to bet, you probably want to bet dog or pass. Miranda Maverick to me just has not warranted being a minus 550. I think that's way too steep. And again, like I said, Shanna Young in this new weight class, she could be live here, right? She has a good frame for this new division. She does look strong. The stand up is improved, and Miranda Maverick doesn't have amazing stand up to begin with. Has a little bit of a ground game, has some decent takedown defense, and I've seen Miranda Maverick struggle to get takedowns against certain fighters. So it's tricky in that way, but Miranda Maverick, I guess, should get the job done, right? I mean, she has the higher pace, she has the overall ground game advantage. She should be able to land takedowns statistically at 2 per fight, statistically at over 60% on the accuracy side of things. So Miranda Maverick should get the job done. But what I do notice with some women's fights is the fighter who should get it done ends up getting outclassed completely. So it would not surprise me at all if Shanna Young outclasses her. I'm not going to bet on that. I think there's some value there. But in terms of me making a pick, Miranda Maverick just has to be the pick because she should get the job done. She checks more boxes, and she's just the overall better fighter. Whether she proves it, we're going to have to wait and see. But Miranda Maverick is going to be my pick.
Yeah, I don't think this fight's going to be as close or as you're indicating here. I think Miranda's going to run away with this fight. I think Miranda might be better everywhere, but the wrestling's the big thing in this fight. Her footwork is a big thing in this fight. She's going to be the stronger girl. Takedowns will be easy. This is a bad matchup for her opponent. So Miranda Maverick, I really do get why the odds are like this. And I think she gets it done, utilizes that grappling. I don't think Shanna Young has anything to offer back. So I'm going to go Miranda Maverick here to get the win.
All right, let's move on to our sixth fight of the prelims, and we are looking at Sean Woodson versus Luis Saldaña. Sean Woodson's on a 2-fight win streak. Last competed back in November, though, so it's been a little bit of time since he last competed. That was a TKO win versus Colin Anglin. Very long for the division. That's kind of his MO. Really tall, 6'2". More importantly, that reach. He's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage in this one. And we know he has that somewhat unique style where a lot of switch stance for one, but he'll use the full extent of his height and his reach. He'll stalk his opponents down. He's very loose and light in his movement. He's more of a volume kind of pepper type of striker, almost Nick Diaz style. A lot of fakes in his stance. He'll throw both hands and feet quickly, accurately. Will keep the hands low at times, but because he is that confident in his striking, usually has the striking advantage over guys that he goes up against. Guys that beat Sean Woodson are guys that have more toughness than him, guys that put pressure on him, guys that are willing to engage with him while using some clinching. He is hard to take down. He has 82% takedown defense. But I mean, again, kind of is potentially beatable. Luis Saldana beat Bruno Souza back in March. Stands at range, switch stance, methodical, picks his strikes, good crisp calf kick, a lot of kicks in general with a very much a leg heavy attack, good counter check hook. Kind of just throws one at a time though. Also leaves his chin up a bit. Those are two concerns that I have with him. He does have some jiu-jitsu, but doesn't really have any wrestling to go along with it. He's gonna want to keep the fight on the feet, and pressure is the path to beating him. Cardio is also a concern with Luis Saldana. Definitely slows down after round one, and I'll keep this prediction very short because again, Sean Woodson all day here. I'm all over this one at minus 300, give or take. It's at about minus 340 now. I think the striking's too good, too clean. The pace is there, the pressure is there. I don't think Luis Saldana will be able to handle it. I don't think he'll have an answer for it. I don't think Luis Saldana's cardio will keep up. And I don't think Luis Saldana is enough of a power threat to get Sean Woodson out of there. So I'm really liking Sean Woodson in this spot. He's probably going to be one of my main picks that I put some money on. Sean Woodson all day here.
Yeah, quick, man. Sean Woodson, man, that reach is going to be a big, big problem. He knows how to use that jab. One of the better boxers in this division or in the UFC. And Saldaña's going to have a hard time. He's going to be eating jabs all night. Striking wise, I think Woodson's the better fighter. This is going to be a striking fight. And I think Woodson's up like a sizable amount better. Strike, not sizable, but he's definitely better striking. This is going to stay on the feet. I got Woodson in this spot here, man. He's going to piece him up with the jab. Maybe go to the body, but I see Woodson even he might even get a finish here because this could be an exciting fight. But I think Woodson gets it done here. Knockout or decision.
All right. Fight number 7 of our prelims. We have Lucie Pudilová taking on Yanan Wu. For Lucie Pudilová, she finds herself back in the UFC after a 2-fight win streak. She last competed back in April. At the time she competed in the UFC, she went on a 4-fight losing streak. That was between 2019 all the way up to 2022. That was when she got cut. 5-1 since then. She competed in octagon primarily or exclusively, I should say. Decent long jab that she does use regularly. Has a decent 1-2 combination. Decent level of pace and activity. Her striking is pretty clean. Good level of consistency from her. She's all hands. Do not expect any kicks from her. Cardio does seem to hold, which is important to note. And also important to note, takedown defense, not quite the best. Always want to keep that in mind. For Yanan Wu, 3-fight losing streak. She lost to Mayra Bueno Silva back in April. A lot of movement in the stand-up. She is looking to throw combinations. She fights from the outside. She does leave herself a bit vulnerable, especially within her combinations. Kind of leaves that chin up a bit. And that's where she finds herself getting caught. Most importantly, I think cardio could be a concern from her. Her movement, if nothing else, is what's primarily going to slow down. I think this is a good spot for Lucie Pudilová as she returns back to the UFC. I think her striking is maybe not cleaner, but I do think it's a little bit more effective. I think she does have the pace to keep up with Yanan Wu because, again, Yanan Wu likes to throw a lot of combinations. And I think Lucie Pudilová is going to be the fighter coming forward. And again, more importantly, I think the cardio will hold a little bit better. So what I'm expecting in this fight, maybe a very close round 1, maybe the first half of round 2 is also very close. But as this fight continues on, I think Lucie Pudilová will be able to pull away, get round 2 in her name, get round 3 in her name. We'll have to see what happens in round 1. And ultimately, we could be looking at, unanimous decision 29-28 type of thing here. So I think it definitely goes to decision. So maybe that's a bet worth looking at. But in terms of making a pick, I'm looking at Lucie Pudilová.
Yes, I get it, man. When you look at both fighters, you can't feel confident on either side. Both have a losing record in the UFC. Um, but I'm not really sold on Yanan Wu in this spot here, man. I don't like her style. To me, she's not aggressive enough. She has submissions, as she has a submission against Lauren Mueller, if I'm correct. Um, but I just think Pudilova is going to be the more aggressive fighter in this spot here. I think she's going to be more. I think she's going to have the stronger shots, and I think she also has the grappling. I think she can get some takedowns. Just being the stronger fighter here. Based on their last performance as well, Pudilova has looked better. So I'm going to go with Pudilova here to get this one done in a fight I wouldn't really invest on, because again, both of these fighters have losing records. But again, Pudilova's on a 2-fight winning streak, and she has a good win in her last fight in Octagon. So I'm gonna go with her, man. She's been looking good in Octagon since she left UFC. She was on a 4-fight losing streak. In Octagon, she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's 5-1 in Octagon. So she turned a corner here. Octagon's a good organization. They do bring out some good fighters, and I just think she's going to be a little bit too much here for Yanan Wu here in this spot.
All right, so let's move on to our final fight of the prelims. We have Jared Gordon taking on Leonardo Santos. For Jared Gordon, he lost to Grant Dawson. That was back in April. Very patient in the stand-up, has those level changes, decent striking defense, likes to come forward. Not really the quickest, though, not really the best movement, but the stand-up is pretty decent, pretty consistent. He has a decent ground game, BJJ brown belt, also has decent timing on his takedown attempts. The takedown numbers are pretty decent, just over 2 per fight, almost 40% on the accuracy side of things. What is concerning for him is his takedown defense, just 54% in that category. But otherwise, a pretty decent overall fighter. And I understand why he's the large favorite here, going up against Leonardo Santos, who's on a 2-fight losing streak at this point after losing to Clay Guida back in December. The first thing you have to point out with Leonardo Santos is his age, 42 years old, right? We saw it last week with Dom Cruz. Time is undefeated, right? 42 years old, Leonardo Santos. At one point, he was undefeated for like 10 years and then went on this 2-fight losing streak since then. He fights pretty tall in the stand-up. He is going to have 4 inches in height. He is going to have 7 inches in reach as well that he'll definitely look to take advantage of. I think he picks his shots pretty well. I think he can use switch stance to his advantage too. He does have decent striking and decent counter striking. He also has good leg kicks. Striking speed, a little bit slow, expected, 42 years old. Good takedown defense, though, which I think will be very important here. His takedown defense is 86%. He shows us a lot of balance in terms of avoiding takedowns. Also is able to land at about a takedown per fight. It does have good ground game, does have good grappling too, unsurprisingly, being a Brazilian fighter. Santos has started to, again, show that age over the last 2 fights, but he's had moments in each of those fights that makes me think that he does have a real shot as a sizable underdog here. I think Santos has, a high IQ, good movement on the feet. I think he's the more diverse striker of the two. Again, I think he has really good takedown defense, which is going to be key for him. And I think he has all the right tools, including the experience. We know Jared Gordon's going to have the age advantage. I think Jared Gordon's going to have the cardio advantage, which is probably more important than anything. We know that Jared Gordon, despite Santos's takedown defense, he is able to land the takedown. But I don't think that Jared Gordon has enough pressure on the feet in this fight. I think Gordon is a bit too patient for his own good. And I think that's going to allow Leonardo Santos to use those physical advantages that he has. I think it's going to allow Leonardo Santos to make it maybe more of a technique type of fight and use his IQ to his advantage. I think from a betting perspective, I'm looking at dog or pass on this one. But in terms of making a pick, I think I also want to side with the dog. I'm not a fan of going for the older fighter, especially when he's 40 plus. But I think that, again, Jared Gordon just doesn't quite do it for me in terms of being confident in his style to win a fight. And with some of the things that I would be confident with Jared Gordon, I think Santos does a good job at nullifying them, at least statistically on paper. And again, primarily, I'm thinking about that takedown defense. So I think the underdog, Leonardo Santos, has a real shot here. I think if these odds were a lot closer, I would side with Jared Gordon. But for as big of an underdog as Leonardo Santos is, I think he has a real shot here, and I think he has some value.
Yeah, there's a lot of value on the Santos side. These odds are crazy, man, because Santos is really dangerous in that first round, and this is a 3-round fight. So Santos comes out, does what he does, wins that round or gets the finish. If he just wins the round, goes to the second round, he just has to win that, and he wins the fight. So Santos is dangerous in that first round. That jiu-jitsu he has, even his striking, he has sneaky striking, that left hand, the hooks. This guy's a dangerous guy. He has some good wins on his record. I think if Gordon gets out of that first round, it's one of those type of fights, right? Where Gordon gets out of that round, he's going to put on a pace. And one thing good about Gordon is he does put on a pace. So this could be a fight where, as the fight goes on, Santos will gas because Gordon is going to have him working throughout the whole fight. So because of the cardio, and I think Gordon can keep the fight going after that first round. I think Gordon is just going to pull away, man. Santos has shown that his cardio is not the same, and I think Gordon has decent cardio that he can exploit that. So, and I think Gordon has good enough grappling to negate some of the grappling. And as far as striking goes, I think Gordon could be the more effective striker in this fight, minute by minute. But I think Santos has that potential that he can land a big shot at any point that could change the fight. So again, I think Gordon is going to make it out of that round, get to the second, third. Cardio is going to play a big factor, and I think Jared's going to run away with it at that point.
All right, let's move on to our main card and let's take a look at the first fight of the main card. We have Tyson Pedro taking on Harry Hunsucker. Pedro beat Ike Villanueva back in April. Decent active jab, very technical, a lot of fakes and feints, solid movement, especially good at fighting at range, good calf kick. He can definitely be explosive. Only 8 wins, but 100% finish rate to go along with it. Good on the ground as well. Don't expect him to be an overwhelming wrestler, but definitely has shown me the ability to land takedowns, good top control, good grappling ability as well. Solid fighter, and still looked pretty decent in his last fight after almost a 4-year layoff in between. So still looking good. Still looking to make a name for himself, and Harry Hunsucker is going to be the opponent that he tries that against, right? Hunsucker last fought in December, lost to Justin Tafa. Background is introduced as kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. He does use a lot of fakes in his striking, a bit indecisive with the striking, kind of lacks a game plan, but the hand speed is a bit underrated. He can be explosive, has those looping hooks, likes to include that calf kick at times too. I won't spend too much time here, mainly because Tyson Pedro is as big of a favorite as he is, minus 800, just not even worth it. Pedro should get the job done here, not worth it at all. I would not make an underdog call on this, but important to note, Harry Hunsucker is coming down to 205 after his first few fights at heavyweight. I think it'll be interesting to see how he looks. I don't think it'll matter, though. In fact, it might even make Hunsucker a little bit chinnier than he was at heavyweight. Pedro, to me, just way better across the board. Should get the job done here. I'm not even interested in minus 800. I'm not interested in a prop. I'm just expecting him to win and not playing this one at all.
Yeah, these odds are crazy, man. Pedro should not be such a big favorite in this fight. I'm not sure against anybody in the UFC. Hunsucker has power. He can land, and Pedro has been a big favorite in the past and lost fights. It's a tough fight, man. Like, even though the odds are indicating Pedro's going to get it done like that, he definitely improved Pedro, his striking. He has that snapping leg kick now in his game. He has some decent smooth striking, but he's still a grappler first. And if he can get this to the mat, he'll make the odds. He'll make you understand why the odds are the way they are if you can get it to the mat. But if he plays striking, the odds shouldn't be like that because Hunsucker does have power. He's a big guy. He can hold him against the cage, and he does have a way to win the fight. But ultimately, I got to go with Tyson Pedro in this spot. He's definitely improving in his striking. And again, as I mentioned, if he can get this to the mat, he's going to look like an 800 favorite in this spot, right? If he can get it to the mat. High level grappling. And I think that's where he's going to shine. So I'm going to go Tyson Pedro to get this one done.
Fight number 2 of our main card, we have Marcin Tybura taking on Alexandr Romanov. A tricky fight here. Marcin Tybura last fought in October. He lost to Alexander Volkov. That was snapping a 5-fight win streak that he was on in the process. Good boxing, especially in close quarters. Good movement for the division. He's a good counterpuncher, especially with that jab. Also uses his kicks pretty effectively. Just has a good steady pace about him, where he's constantly scoring points without really exerting a large amount of energy. Good striking defense. He stays pretty calm. He can box in both stances. And don't forget, with Marcin Tybura, he has a ground game. He almost prefers the fight on the ground at times. He averages a takedown and a half per fight. Good takedown defense as well at 82%, which is definitely going to be very relevant for this fight. And really just an overall pretty well-rounded heavyweight going up against Alexandr Romanov, who beat Chase Sherman back in April, still undefeated at this point, 16-0. We know Alexandr Romanov is going to have that sort of power wrestling style, good takedowns, good takedown technique, and has a lot of speed as well with those takedown entries. He has really good top position. Doesn't really have the best striking or best striking defense, although it is something that is improving fight over fight. Southpaw on the feet, he'll control the center of the octagon. He'll use his kicks as well, but really only just enough stand up to kind of bring the fight to the mat. This fight is tricky for a number of reasons. For one, Alexandr Romanov, we know that top of the division, 255. He's coming in right around 235, at least, compared to his last fight or 2 fights ago, I should say, for him. And with that power wrestling style, you got to think the extra weight was very advantageous for him. So coming down 30 pounds, I'm not sure how well that's going to work for him. But one thing that has done for him is it's made some cardio improvements for him. And I think that could work in his favor in terms of having enough to kind of give him, 2 rounds of control in his favor. But also a tricky fight for a number of other reasons. I think Tybura is going to have the striking advantage. I think that's pretty clear to say. And again, Tybura has good takedown defense, right? So on paper, he has the formula to say, hey, he can get the win here versus Romanov. I think if nothing else, Marcin Tybura is definitely live, especially after that first round. I think despite the takedown defense percentage from Tybura, I don't think he's really faced the type of wrestler that Romanov is. So I do think that Romanov will be able to land those takedowns. And I do think a lot of this fight is going to come down to the cardio, like I mentioned. The fight could be very similar to that Romanov versus Juan Espino fight. And I think about the fact that Espino was able to, reverse some of those clinch positions. Espino actually landed more takedowns than Romanov in that fight too. But the takedown for me, the takeaway, I should say, in that fight for me was that Romanov, using that weight advantage to keep Espino against the cage, or I should say that strength advantage. Romanov also having enough cardio to still be effective throughout the fight, despite the early stoppage with what that fight ended up being. But again, more importantly, he showed me enough cardio to still go for the takedown, to still implement that power wrestling style, even if he's not, showing to be the freshest fighter, still has that in him to get that job done. Also keep in mind, like I said, Romanov 20 to 30 pounds lighter this time around. He might actually be outweighed by Marcin Tybura in this fight. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think this is one that I want to see how they look face to face. I anticipate Romanov getting takedowns no matter what, but if Tybura is just really looking a lot bigger than him, then I might make an underdog play here. But as it stands right now, what I'm expecting Romanov to still be able to implement his takedowns, and I'm expecting Romanov to have at least 2 rounds worth of takedown cardio in him to control those 2 rounds. And Marcin Tybura, by all means, can win one of those 3 rounds pretty decisively. So I think Alexandr Romanov is going to get the job done here. I don't necessarily think split decision type of fight, but I do think that this fight is a lot closer than the odds would indicate. But at the same time, I also see Alexandr Romanov being able to implement his style pretty much hassle free for the most part. So Alexandr Romanov is going to get the job done here, in my opinion. But there's still a lot of question marks with Romanov and just with this being fight in general. So I'm probably not too trigger happy in terms of throwing this on parlays.
Yeah, I see Ramanov running through this guy, man. Like Tybura, I like the guy, man, but he hasn't fought in any wrestlers like throughout his career. The only guys he's fought that had better wrestling than him was Tim Johnson. He lost that fight. Everybody else that he's fought, he's had the wrestling advantage in those fights. Now Romanov's gonna have a massive, massive wrestling advantage. Much better wrestler than Tim Johnson. I see Romanov getting takedowns. I see his pressure. I see him finishing Tybura on the mat here, ground and pound type of thing here. But yeah, Romanov, he's gonna run through this guy, man. Easy win. I got Romanov in this spot.
All right, let's move on. Third fight of our main card, we're looking at Jose Aldo taking on Merab Dvalishvili. This is a super tough fight here. Jose Aldo beat Rob Font back in December, 3-fight winning streak. Good pressure style in the stand-up. He's a very complete, diverse striker at this point. Of course, we know that. Muay Thai stance, high-level boxer, uses the hooks to the body, a lot of fakes and feints, very high striking IQ, throws great combinations. We know the kicks, although they're not as abundant, still some of the nastiest kicks in the game. And his takedown defense, extremely important to note in this fight. Jose Aldo has one of the best takedown defenses ever in the UFC at 90%, especially given how many fights he's been in. Very impressive. Merab Dvalishvili, 5-fight win streak. He beat Marlon Moraes back in September 2021, so almost a year since he last fought. The name of the game with Merab is pace. He pushes that high pace. The cardio never runs out. He's a relentless wrestler. He's a chain wrestler, smothering wrestler. One caveat is that he still doesn't really have that ability to keep guys down, right? He can land takedown after takedown after takedown. We see his numbers there, 7 takedowns per fight. But what does that tell you? That also tells you that guys are getting up no problem when he takes them down. In terms of his stand-up, a lot of fakes and feints, a lot of level changes. He is getting a bit more patient. I think the stand-up is improved since the beginning of his UFC career for sure. But I mean, again, this is another tough fight on this main card, which is kind of the theme of this main card. Extremely tough fight here because I believe that there's key advantages on each side that can allow either fighter to dictate the fight. The 3 rounds I think will definitely help Jose Aldo a lot here. Doesn't necessarily have cardio issues, but he does slow down a little bit. Whereas again, we know Merab is going to stay that very high pace from beginning to end. Don't forget, in Merab's last fight, Marlon Moraes almost finished him, right? That's gonna highlight the striking discrepancy that I believe exists in this fight. Merab is a bit vulnerable on the feet, again with that aggressiveness that he has, and even again, like I said, he's been showing a little bit more patience. That patience could actually work against him here. Because we saw how Marlon Moraes was able to outclass, was able to pick him apart on the feet. And Jose Aldo should be able to do the same thing with better IQ or with potentially the ability to finish it, whereas Moraes couldn't. I mean, you might put a different referee in there and that Moraes fight could have been over. So that's kind of how close Moraes was to finishing Merab. And that speaks to, again, the discrepancy that I believe exists on the feet. We know that Merab obviously is a legitimate takedown threat for anyone in the division. I think he will land takedowns on Jose Aldo, but again, I think it'll work against him that he's not the best at keeping guys down. I don't think his takedowns will be as effective as people think for this fight. I think Jose Aldo is going to use his IQ here to keep the fight on the feet, where he is going to be flat out better. But again, this is a very close fight. I've gone back and forth several times with this fight. with Jose Aldo's style, I can see Merab getting those shoots in terms of takedown attempts. I can see him landing the takedown, and it could be a super frustrating night for Jose Aldo. On the flip side, I can see Jose Aldo stuffing those takedowns relatively easily and just starching him on the feet. So I'm very torn on which direction I want to go in with this fight. My gut says go with the youth with Merab, but my brain is telling me to go with Jose Aldo. 90% takedown defense. It's a historic number, I think, for a reason. And I think he's going to use that IQ to his advantage to make sure that this fight stays on the feet. And I think Jose Aldo has a huge advantage there. So, very tough pick for me to make, but I'm going to go with the underdog. Jose Aldo is going to get the job done.
Yeah, this is a good one, man. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going with Merab all day in this spot. Now, Aldo, though, the thing about him, he's really big in this weight class. Like he looked so much bigger than Rob fought when they fought. So definitely, it might be a situation where Merab is just not big enough. So I want to see the weigh-in in this fight. But his heart is pressure. He's never been knocked out he's never been finished by strikes. Aldo hasn't had a finish by strikes since 2019. I think this is going to go to decision here, and I think Merab, the pace, is going to be an issue here. This guy has a bunch of sambo matches. He does in between his fights. He stays active, good cardio. I think his pace is going to win the fight. So I'm going to go Merab, but I definitely get what you're saying, man. Aldo looks stacked, looks jacked at this division. He can easily stuff these takedowns, but I just think that Merab, after he gets stuffed the first time, he goes again and again until he gets it right. So I like Merab's takedowns in this fight, and I think he's going to do that over 3 rounds.
Co-main event of the evening, we're looking at Paulo Costa taking on the return of Luke Rockhold. Costa's on a 2-fight losing streak. He hasn't competed since losing to Marvin Vettori back in October of last year. So almost a year since his last fight. Good pressure in the stand-up. He's always coming forward. We know Paulo Costa has that scary power. 11 of his 13 wins are via KO, TKO. Also has good combinations, good striking diversity, and very heavy, almost underrated in terms of his kicks. His cardio has been questionable, slowing down after that first round, really. But, has that explosiveness in him at any time. He can always count on his power, even late in fights. He's shown, explosive moments where he can still implement the style that he wants to implement. Luke Rockhold hasn't competed in over 3 years at this point. July 2019 was the last time he fought. That was a loss to Jan Blachowicz, of course, in the light heavyweight division. He's a southpaw. He has those signature high kicks, very crafty with that kick-heavy attack, a good calf kick as well. We know Luke Rockhold has pretty good striking IQ. He's going to be that fighter that's going to try to come forward, close distance, have that methodical type of style. Important to note, though, with Luke Rockhold, you got to highlight the losses. And the reason I say that is because he has 4 losses in the UFC, and all 4 of those losses are via KO. His chin flat out just has not been reliable. That's always going to be a concern. And I'm curious to see what that means when he hasn't competed in 3 years, when he's coming back as a 37-year-old fighter. I'm curious what that chin is going to look like. We know Rockhold is a former champ, so definitely should be a very interesting fight. Expected to stay on the feet. And again, like I said, I'm curious how Rockhold's going to look after 3 years. Age is definitely a major factor here. Paulo Costa, athletic prime, 31 years old. We know kind of 28 to 32 is kind of your prime athletic years. Costa's right in there. Whereas, again, Luke Rockhold is definitely past that at 37 years old. 3-year layoff, definitely hard to ignore. Rockhold has great striking IQ. He can, he has that tricky quick kick, especially those question mark kicks. Could definitely catch anyone with that. But ultimately, I think that Paulo Costa probably likely to get a KO here. I think, it only takes one shot against Rockhold's chin. And I think that Costa has that ability to land that at any time in the fight. Rockhold, of course, more of a technical fighter as opposed to someone who's going to put that high pressure on you. Also, Costa has the ability to land big in exchanges. Sometimes he wants to engage. And if Rockhold chooses to do so, I think that's also another spot where he can get clipped. Even if he doesn't get clipped, I can see Costa just being the aggressor, having better moments as the fight goes on, and really just not giving up his spot in these middleweight rankings in this middleweight division to a fighter in Luke Rockhold, who is of course trying to come back almost Misha Tate style, where wants to just come back and get right into the rankings right away. But I think it's almost a rude awakening to realize that the talent level is a lot different than when he was competing in his prime. So Paulo Costa, I think, is going to get the job done here. A KO would not surprise me. A KO, dare I say, is even likely to happen. Paulo Costa is going to be my pick.
Yeah, we're gonna need a vintage performance from Rockhold, man. Like Bisping Rockhold won to get the win in this fight here, man. This is gonna be a tough fight coming out from 3 years off. Fighting Costa, it's not gonna look good, man. And he had chin issues then. He's only older now. I think Costa's gonna find that chin. He's gonna hurt him. I think this is a bad fight stylistically for Luke Rockhold. Costa did well with Marvin Vettori as far as the grappling. And I think that Marvin Vettori is a stronger guy than Luke, right? So I see Paulo keeping this on the feet and punishing him with the striking. I think he's gonna knock him out. He's gonna hurt him, man. This is a bad fight for him. So I got Costa here. I think he gets it done pretty easily.
All right, let's move on then to our main event of the evening. Of course, that is the rematch between Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards. That first fight happened in 2015, if my memory serves me correctly. Kamaru Usman beat Colby Covington back in November to retain the title. We know that with Kamaru Usman, the boxing still improves on a fight-by-fight basis. Very patient, methodical, technical, efficient, good jab. Repeats that jab over and over again. It's definitely something that they've worked on. Good straight right hand as well. It is able to hurt people. I mean, we saw what it did to Jorge Masvidal. The advantage with Usman is that he's steady, he's consistent, like I mentioned, and we know the world-class wrestling that comes along with it. Right at 3 takedowns per fight, right around 50% on the accuracy side of things, 100% takedown defense. So again, just the overall package in terms of his ground game, and really just the overall package in general. One of the best pound for pound, probably one of the best ever in terms of the UFC. Going up against Leon Edwards, over a year since he beat Nate Diaz back in June of 2021, of course. 10-fight unbeaten streak since his loss to Kamaru Usman back in 2015. Dynamic and quick on the feet, good movement, quick hands, nice 1-2 combinations. A very diverse striker as well. Leon Edwards, physically strong, almost an underrated wrestler as well. He puts up, almost a takedown and a half per fight. Respectable 70% in terms of his takedown defense. Leading up to this fight, I don't want to put too much stock into their first fight. I mean, it was back in 2015. I feel like so much has changed since then. So I don't want to put too much stock into that. But leading up to this fight, Kamaru Usman kind of already put the signal out there. And he said to Leon Edwards, expect to wrestle in this one. Usman landed 6 takedowns in their first fight. And again, like I said, I don't want to put too much stock on that. But I think about a relatively recent fight that Leon Edwards had. And I'm thinking about that Gunnar Nelson fight, right? Another fighter who's going to intentionally try to take the fight to the ground. That was still 3 years ago, back in 2019, but a little bit more relevant. Gunnar Nelson was able to land 3 takedowns in that fight. So, what that's telling me, Usman landed 6 the first time around. The last time Leon Edwards faced a takedown artist, he was taken down 3 times. Plus Usman sending that signal out, hey, expect to wrestle. I think the takedown obviously is going to be very key in this fight for Kamaru Usman. And I think that he will be able to land a takedown. I think what works against Usman here is the improvements that he's made on the feet. In previous Usman fights, we have mentioned here that he's kind of fallen in love with the striking a little bit because he's capable of doing so, right? He knocked out the striker in Jorge Masvidal with his striking rather than, using wrestling necessarily, although he used it throughout the fight. So, when I think about that, what I think about is Usman might try to stand up too much for his own good. Might try to stand up to a point where he gets caught by Leon Edwards. We've seen Kamaru Usman kind of get rocked in the past, and Edwards is definitely the most dangerous opponent, at least on paper, that he can go up against in this welterweight division. So I think, when you think about this fight, just as a fan, Leon Edwards is going to give you your best shot to kind of strip the title from him. And I think Leon Edwards could get the job done here. But ultimately, I am going to land on the champ. I am going to land on Kamaru Usman being my pick for this one. I think Usman is simply the smarter pick. You're going to have to assume he has the IQ to kind of stick to wrestling in this one, as opposed to trying out his stand-up against Leon Edwards. And I think it's going to help Usman what Nate Diaz was able to do to Edwards late in that fight. I know it was one lucky shot, but that leaves an imprint in your head. So that might make Usman think he can get it done on the feet too. But again, like I said, tough matchup, close matchup, but I do think Usman is the smarter pick, and I do think the champ will have the IQ to do what he needs to do, get takedowns, get rounds in his favor, try to avoid the threat, make it ugly, not give Leon Edwards a chance to kind of land cleanly here. So I am going to go with the champ, Kamaru Usman. I think he gets it. I think he gets the job done in this rematch as well.
Wow, this is a good one, man. Both these guys are on like a 10-fight plus winning streak. I think that's the first time I was reading. That's the first time this has ever happened where two fighters are going in with a 10-fight winning streak into a UFC fight. So Usman, man, he's getting older, man, but he's been looking good, man. Falling in love with his hands. He has that one shot kill, knock these guys out, and he has that wrestling. Obviously, he's a high level wrestler. But will he wrestle Edwards? I'm not sure, man. I know he said he will. I think Edwards has gotten better with the grappling since the first fight. In the first fight, Edwards was a British fighter, not really having that wrestling game, not really having that grappling game. Now he's been in the game for so long. He knows Usman's strategy. He's going to come prepared. So it's going to be a different fight from the first one. Completely different fight. I can see Usman going out there, utilizing that wrestling, but can his cardio hold up for that? And he's a smart guy that he probably won't go with this approach because he knows Edwards is a big guy to hold down for 5 rounds. It's not the same as holding down Woodley, who was not dangerous in the striking when he fought Usman. Edwards is going to be dangerous. I know Usman's a problem. I know he's a problem, pound for pound. But I've been waiting for this fight, and I think I said this years ago, Harris. I think I said Edwards is going to get him, man. I think I said it, man, and I'm going to say it on this channel, man. I think Edwards is going to pull off the upset here. This is a movie, man. This guy lost the fight years ago when he was younger. Usman was in his prime by age. Now the roles have reversed. Now Edwards is in his prime. Big guy. He's not just a skinny guy like the first fight. This fight, he's a big 6'2" welterweight. He's gonna come into the ring as the bigger guy. I think his wrestling has improved enough, and I think his foot movement, is his footwork. That's gonna be the biggest thing in this fight. And I think he gets it done, man. I think Usman might get knocked out, but I'm gonna go Leon Edwards here to pull off the upset.
All right, not mad at that pick at all. As a fan, I definitely want to see Leon Edwards pull it out. So let's see what happens there. But let's take it to Vegas in the meantime, and let's consider an underdog pick that we are potentially looking at. Of course, I will pinpoint the different underdogs for you. I think I know which direction you're going in, but nonetheless, we have Daniel Da Silva as an underdog. We have Jay Perrin as an underdog, Francisco Figueiredo, Ange Loosa, Shanna Young, Luis Saldaña, Yanan Wu, Leonardo Santos, Tyson Pedro, Harry Hunsucker, I should say, versus Tyson Pedro, Marcin Tybura, Jose Aldo, Luke Rockhold, and Leon Edwards.
Okay, I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with Leon Edwards, man, to pull off the upset.
Yeah, have to. I figured. My underdog pick will be a little bit more subdued. I'm going with Jose Aldo as my underdog pick. Pretty close to a pick 'em there, but Aldo is on the slight underdog side of that one, so that's going to be my underdog pick. And in terms of kind of favorites or parlay picks, what are you looking at piecing together?
All right, parlay wise, I'm gonna go with Paulo Costa. I'm gonna go with Sean Woodson, Alexander Romanov, and Miranda Maverick.
And Miranda Maverick. All right, so we got 4 fights there. Those 4 fights will equate to a 2.44. What that means is that $100 will get you a total return of $244. And for our bigger betters, $250 will get you a total return of $610. In terms of my favorite picks, some similar ones on the board, some different ones as well. I am looking at Amir Albazi to get the job done. I am looking at AJ Fletcher to get the job done. And I'm also taking a look at Sean Woodson as well as Paulo Costa as well. So 2 similar picks there, 2 different picks on my side, but still 4 fights overall. Those 4 fights will be a 3.41. What that means is that $100 will return 341 in total. And for our bigger betters, $250 will return 853. So let's officially sign off on that note. Please let us know how you feel in the comments. How do you feel about our picks? How do you feel about this main event? Do you think Leon Edwards gets it done? Do you think Usman will retain the title? We definitely want to hear from you. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Of course, full fight prediction video, UFC 278, Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards, the rematch, coming from yours truly here at Boxing MMA Picks. He goes by Zahn, I go by Harris, and in our usual fashion, let's get this money.
Let's get it.